As a lifelong fan of science fiction, 2001: A Space Odyssey sits pretty high on my list of ultimate favorites. It isn't simply a film. It is, as the title suggests, an odyssey. A cinematic odyssey as well as an odyssey of mankind. From primitives learning how to use tools and weapons to pioneers of the cosmos. There's a nice little time jump there that I believe is one of the biggest in cinematic history. I remember when I was first getting into film in general, and Kubrick specifically, I convinced my dad to rent this one and watch it with me. I was blown away. He wasn't so much. I liked it so much that I rewound the VHS and immediately watched it again. I've always been a sucker for sci-fi, probably since my dad introduced me to Star Wars in 1995. And Kubrick's sterile, meticulous depictions of space, the zero-G effects, the Earth and Moon, a whole year before the actual moon landing, just absolutely transfixed me to the screen. And this is to say nothing of the infamous hail.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
The monolith. Jupiter and beyond the infinite. Or the space child. It's hard sci-fi mixed with philosophical ideas, suspense, drama, you name it. But I can fully understand critics of this film. I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, and that's okay. Some folks might be kind of bored by the slow pacing of the film, even though the docking sequence set to the Blue Danube Waltz I just find absolutely beautiful and iconic. The realistic depictions of space with its deafening silence, its freezing emptiness, matched by the cold logic of the AI that, spoiler alert for a movie that's been out for 51 years, you've been warned, but come on, 51 years? Let's get on it. Betrays his crew rather than admit that he's made a mistake. In this regard, he's kind of the most human character in the whole movie. But even if it's not something you would normally enjoy, I think it's worth watching once, at the very least. I have seen it somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 times, but that's excessive, Dan. I'm not expecting that of anybody. Watch it once and see how you feel after that. This was also the movie that introduced me to the music of Gheorghe Ligeti, which I'm sure I'm probably butchering that name. I've always been a fan of classical type music, which this film is full of. There's actually a score written for this movie, and then at the last minute, Kubrick just changed it to be all classical music. He had to be a pleasant man to work with. But Ligheti's music is on a different level. It's very strange, ethereal, and often unsettling. His Requiem for soprano, which can be heard in the scene with the monolith on the moon, it's one of my favorite scenes, it is like anxiety made into music. I actually just get chills even thinking about it. It was a landmark in visual effects, coming a whole 9 years before Star Wars, which we all know how groundbreaking that was in '77. And it tells a grand tale of human curiosity and exploration, something I find just as relevant now as it was during the space race. Stanley Kubrick's style can be an acquired taste, but I feel like once you open yourself up to it, it's such a rewarding experience. Now I know what you're all wondering. What does it mean, Dan? Explain the monolith and the space child. Explain it, Dan! And I will. I'm just kidding. I don't pretend to know everything about this film, and I'm okay with that. I like having some mystery and ambiguity, and I think the lack of clearly explained things is what bothers some people when it comes to certain films. I've personally never really had that problem. I'll just keep rewatching a movie over and over just to see if any of the vagueness takes on new meaning. Because when I watch a movie, it's more the experience that concerns me rather than whether or not everything is clearly explained by the end of it. Obviously, I like movies that have a clearly defined plot and wrap things up rather nicely, but it isn't always necessary for my viewing pleasure. I have friends that criticize me for almost universally liking every movie I see. I mean, they're wrong, but that's a fair point. Of course, I've been disappointed by movies, but it's usually because I just wanted to like them more. Mostly movies are such a magic to me that I have a hard time being very critical of them if they have moved or affected me even in the smallest of ways. Honestly, sometimes just being visually pleasing is enough for me. As some of you know, I do have a strange taste in movies, and often the weirder the better. But I see them as pure visual art. And even if they're non-narrative, basically the film version of an instrumental, I love them. Often more than narrative films, if I'm being completely honest. And this one could almost qualify as non-narrative. There's so little dialogue. This is really just a roundabout way of dodging the question and saying that I don't really know what the monolith is supposed to be. I guess if pressured to give a definite answer, I would say that it is the catalyst for human evolution and discovery. Think of when we see it. It appears before the apes. Soon after, one of them learns to use tools. We find it buried on the moon with a signal beaming towards Jupiter. So we send our astronauts in their spacecraft with the AI, all new forms of tools to investigate. And then we see it flying through space just before Dave travels through the space gate, where he comes to an unknown location, and we see him in different stages of aging. And finally, as he lies dying in bed, the monolith once again appears before him, right before we see him replaced with the space child. Maybe that's missing the mark, but I think it's the progression of human development and exploration. And if I'm wrong, don't really care. If someone gives me an explanation or a theory that works better or is based on something Arthur C. Clarke or Stanley Kubrick said, I welcome it. I honestly haven't really researched it that much because I don't really need an answer. I love the experience of this film every time I watch it. That, for me, is the joy of watching someone's art. Finding meaning in what they have put before us and reacting to how it affected us as an audience. That's the beauty of film. And that's why I love 2001: A Space Odyssey. If you're interested in embarking on this cinematic journey, it's available for rental from these various streaming platforms. Thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed this, be sure to tune in next time as I cover another of my absolute favorite films of all time. I'm Dan, and this is why I love it.